Well, welcome to the Master Property Program webinar entitled A Data-Enabled Approach to Prevent Fire Sprinkler Failures. This session was first scheduled to be presented at our annual loss workshop in St. Louis, but due to the virus outbreak, it had to be canceled, and our speakers were pleased to offer this session in a webinar format. There is a box that you will see that says questions. So if you have any questions as we go through the presentation, just type your question in the box. We'll take questions at the end of the webinar. Also, there's a button that says handouts. And if you'd like a copy, if you'd like to copy off the presentation today, at some point during the session, you'll need to click on that button as well to get a copy of the survey or a copy of the handout. So at this time, I'll introduce our speakers. Our speakers today are Gorev Mulek and Pepe Pena, and they're from Johnson Controls. So welcome, Gorev and Pepe, and I think I'll turn it over to Pepe.
Hi, thank you for the introduction. I hope everybody can hear me well and that everybody's doing great on this Friday. Like was mentioned, we were really excited to do this presentation live back in March, but that was just the beginning of a lot of the virus starting, so we couldn't do it. So this was the best alternative that we could do, and I'm glad you guys were able to join. So I'm Pedro Pena. I go by Pepe. So just please address me as Pepe, and I'm the engineering manager here in Johnson Controls for this IoT and connected products. And I'm presenting with Gorev Mulek, which is the product manager. He'll introduce himself. Actually, Gorev, why don't you introduce yourself here now in the beginning?
Yep. Hey, good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Gorev. I am the product manager at Johnson Controls within the fire suppression business unit, focused on IoT products and also our software portfolio. So like Pepe said, we're very excited to be speaking to this group today. Wish it was, live and face-to-face, but this is a good alternative. And, we're excited to sort of review, the topic today. Through the presentation, we'll obviously talk about our approach and how we sort of, build up on this technology. We also have a few poll questions we'll ask just to get, feedback from the group on, challenges they've faced and how this may apply to them. So welcome and good afternoon, and look forward to a good presentation here.
All right, thank you, Gorev. So if you don't mind going to the next slide here. So to get started, I usually like to just sort of ground everybody with some of the reasons behind why we started doing some of these projects. And it comes down to sort of inspection, testing, and maintenance. So a lot of you might be familiar with NFPA 25, which establishes the minimum requirements for periodic inspections, testing, and maintenance for water-based fire protection systems. In most cases, the minimum requirement is a quarterly inspection. And some of the inspections related to like pressure are supposed to be done weekly. Ideally, you'd like to do this, as often as possible to make sure that your fire protection system is available to fight a fire. But then that just becomes an unreasonable ask to have somebody come in, that frequently to be able to do an inspection. As it is quarterly, sometimes you have delays or you have things that get in the way, and you don't always get them on time, as it is required. The minimum requirement does provide a reasonable degree of certainty that the system will perform, right? But again, it is not always enough to identify potential risk because you only get a snapshot of what the system is doing at that time. Next slide. So if we look at this in a different way, depending how big of your site or your campus is, so your quarterly inspections happens every 3 months. So every 3 months, you have somebody come into your building, produce a report that provides insight to the performance and compliance of the fire sprinkler system at a very coarse interval. Unfortunately, as maybe some of you have endured, the system can deteriorate pretty quickly, right? And the odds of something happening while an inspector is on site doing your quarterly inspection are very low, right? I mean, you have way more chances of something failing when there's somebody in there looking at the system than when somebody comes in every 3 months. Next slide, please. So by definition, right, the status quo of how we protect and we sort of our fire protection system is reactive by definition, right? We have quarterly inspections that try to do some of this preventative maintenance and try to see how the system is behaving. But more often than not, we're waiting for something to go from a healthy point to potentially a risk without us even knowing, to the point that it could be a system failure, right? So this is sort of a broad definition where a healthy system would be sort of no leaks, everything is as working as intended, as it was designed. At risk, it could be a small leak or something going to sort of get into a freezing point. And a system failure could be when that leak becomes big enough to trip your system without you knowing, or it might be when something freezes and then you have leaky pipes after they thaw and they have just water over the place. So by definition, we're sort of waiting for something to happen before we call in somebody for service. And the part about this, right, is that when some of these preventable issues, the outcomes end up being a lot more costly, right? So this is not limited to more expensive repairs. It could happen in the middle of the night. You have longer duration and disruption and inconvenience, and just the negative impact it can have on productivity, depending on what type of facility this happens in. So really, the question is, if this is what we're, the status quo right now, should we be doing more, and can we do more? And I think before we go to the next slide, this is one of the parts that we'd like to interact before we sort of present what some of the technology is. So I think there's a couple of questions right after the slide. Maybe? Yes, so again, when we do this live, we like to sort of interact with the audience. The best way we could do this now is this way. So if you sort of roughly in the last year, how many times have you personally had to deal with unexpected maintenance related issues to your fire protection system? And again, this sort of to gauge sort of the audience and sort of the experiences they've had with the fire protection system in the past.
All right. We have a few votes coming in. I'll just give it a couple more seconds. All right. I think we got the votes that we're gonna get, so I'm gonna go ahead and close the poll.
Oh wow, okay. So this is actually a lot more than I thought it would be, at least on the 5 to 10 and then graded to 10. Then we'll have half of the group here that has not had any issues, which that's sort of what you want, right? You sort of want your sprinkler system to be out of mind and out of sight. But then some sites could have repeat offenders that could be freezing, or it could be just false trips. So it's interesting to see that a quarter of the group has had more than 5 in the last year, and then the other half hasn't had any issues. So okay, next question, please.
All right. It is open.
So I realize this question doesn't apply to the people that didn't have any issues last year, and we don't have a response for that group.
Yeah. I have about 25% have voted, so I'll get a couple more seconds. Leave it open.
I suspect 50% would respond, right? Since 50% didn't have any issues.
All right. I think we got all our votes. I'll go ahead and close it. There's the results.
All right. Yeah, and this is, we'd love to know what sort of inconvenience and, and sort of for all of the above, what has been sort of your specific issues that you've encountered with your sprinkler system. And unfortunately, we can't do this in this way, but so at least we have an idea of what the group has sort of gone through. So third question, please.
All right.
So so this is one of the last minute questions we put in, and knowing that this has now been going on for the better part of the last quarter, we have we would think that this might affect your regularly scheduled inspections, and more curious than anything to see in this group here if anybody has had any impact of cancellations, whether from your side or from the inspector's company side. That have canceled any inspections just because he interacting with strangers, or just because the state is sort of making sure that there's not that kind of interaction, people going into buildings and doing that kind of work. So this is more of a curiosity question to see if the group here has had to cancel any of the regular scheduled inspections.
Close the poll now. And there you go.
Okay, so pretty good. About half have had had an impact because of the COVID-19 on their inspections. And the reason we asked this question is because some of this what we are going to be presenting related to this technology will provide some of the same things that you can do in inspection, right? So some of the things that are done in quarterly inspections we'll touch on, and you'll see sort of once we get towards the end of the presentation that some of the quarterly inspections, are the intent of the inspections on the NFPA standards, are sort of guided to make sure that your system is properly functioning, and we can do a lot of that remotely already, right? So I think that's the last question, at least for now. So I think we'll get okay. All right, so now we have a little bit of background on the audience and a little bit of background on sort of some of the reasons we're doing this because of the NFPA. So I'd like to now sort of give a little bit of an overview to what we're going to start talking about, this Internet of Things. Something that you might hear a lot. It sounds like a big buzzword. But at the end of the day, a lot of you might already be using a lot of this Internet of Things. It's very common in other industries. A lot of you might have smart temperature controllers at home, at work. It's used in cars. So basically, the most basic definition of Internet of Things is being able to sensorize sort of regular day things and be able to collect data to analyze it, whether in the internet, bring it and do it remotely in a way that it will benefit the person using it, right? So it could be from a convenience standpoint, it could be from a increased safety and peace of mind, and just in the industrial world, this is used a lot, right? It's been applied in a lot of different ways. And each application does share a common goal of using real-time data to increase operational efficiency and then make data-driven proactive decisions. And when we think about this and try to take this concept and apply it to the fire sprinkler industry, I think we can provide very similar results. Next question. Next slide, sorry. So yeah, so smart connected devices has been a very trending topic for a lot of different industries, including the fire protection industry. And just wanted to show, hey, if we can move the fire sprinkler system to a smarter future. So I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but just at a high level architecture of our IoT system, the Internet of Things, you have 4 layers, right? So you have usually your sensors and actuators, which allows you to interact, the interaction with the real world. The sensors convert information from the physical world to digital signals, right? So you're talking about pressures and temperatures and things like that, and convert them into signals that we can sort of now push into the cloud. So actuators allows you to interact, right, with the physical world. So there'll be, so you have both things. You can read and then you can sort of write. We're sort of focused right now with the sensor side. The second layer is part of the data acquisition system and the edge devices, which allows the system to take the digital signal from the sensors and convert it to real engineering units, right? So not just volts, but now we can convert them to PSI, we can convert it to gallons per minute, to Fahrenheit, or whatever we need to that we're measuring to convert it to real data that we can use. The third layer is the internet gateway, which you need to send data to the internet. This could be done multiple different ways. You can do it over, Ethernet, so hardwired or wireless. You can also do radio, or through like an AT&T SIM card, which are the technology that we're using. And the last part is what really has enabled a lot of this IoT push in the last decade or so. It's just the cloud computing and analytics, right? So now this is the big key to it. It gives you the capability to store, manage, and analyze data. And also, for the end user, it's what allows you to interact with your system, interact with the real world from your computer or anywhere, from your phone, anywhere else that you have access to the internet. And that's really what has enabled a lot of this. So now that we have that little bit of background, let's talk about a little more detail of what the solution that we have developed here is. So this is so applying IoT to the fire sprinkler system. So we have some of the similar layers, right? So at the high level architecture allows the sprinkler system to become an IoT system by doing the same, right? So we have sensors that convert pressure, temperature, and water presence in your condensate drains into digital data. Those those could be anywhere in the building. Those are shown by the little red dots. We also have the edge devices, which pre-process data from the sensors and then connect to the internet gateway. Our internet gateway basically aggregates all that data and then sends it to the edge device at a site and then routes it to the internet. And then we have a cloud-based platform that provides the ability for users to interact with the data. So that when you log in, you have all your system information, and you can look at sort of historical data related to your system. Click through here. Okay. So what we're currently offering as part of our fire protection, sort of our data-enabled fire protection system, it's this connected fire system that includes gateways that are applicable to wet, dry, and pre-action systems. We can measure temperature, so a remote temperature system. We have a dry pipe valve monitoring device, but it could also, we've sort of changed this to also work, with a wet system. We can monitor air pressure, water pressure, and compressor pressure. And then we also have low point monitors, so your condensate drains and dry systems, to determine temperature and water presence. And using all that information, what we do in the cloud side is that we make it we make some rules and make so we can give advance notice depending on how the system is behaving. So we can now see trends related to system pressures and cycling and compressors, how often they're going up and down. So we can determine leaks, and we can see at a low point if there's water, and if there's water in a low point in the middle of the summer, like right now, it's not a big deal. But if you get a low point, but if it's in the middle of the winter, then that is going to be something that could be an issue if it's not prevented or if it's not drained. So those things that might not be sort of in people's mind all the time, it's something that we can monitor and provide advanced notifications. And the whole goal of this, we started this as an experiment, is to really prove that data-enabled systems can empower you to be proactive when it comes to taking care of your fire protection system and making sure that things that are preventable could be prevented to, make sure they don't become bigger things. Next slide, please. All right, so now let's look into, what does this look like in the real world? And this is one of the first prototypes that we have installed. So some of the things you'll see here have been, I think in the next slide we'll show the updated version, but this is really what it would look like. So we have your cellular gateway, which one gateway can support up to 3,000 devices. So each gateway can support 3,000 of the edge devices. So depending on, how many systems you have, how many low points you have installed, how many temperature sensors you want to have in, let's say, attics or garages or places that are not usually heated spaces, it can support up to 3,000 of those devices. Here we also have the sensor interface device that's on the right side, and then we'll have some of the pressure sensors installed in one of these dry pipe systems, where we're monitoring air, water pressure, and compressor pressure. Next slide. So just looking a little bit more closely here, this is sort of the initial sensor developed to gather data from the sprinkler system. and again, help address some of the common issues associated with pressure, temperature, and water presence. So, on the right, so well, I guess let's go from the left. You have, your on a valve, you would install this pressure transducers where you have your gauge already. So you usually have a gauge for the water side and one for the air side. Usually you have this 3-way valve with a plug where this is meant to be retrofitted into systems. So usually we just close that valve without having to drain the system, take the plug that's existing, and basically replace it with a smart plug, being the transducer, right? So that's what that green arrow is pointing at. That connects to our edge device, which is one of the black boxes. And it has 3 connections for the pressure transducers in the system. It's again water, air, and the compressor. In the middle here, we have the remote temperature sensor, which could be installed anywhere. The box itself is magnetic in the back, so we've had a pretty good, we have a lot of good feedback from our pilot sites already on how easy this is to install, because most of your pipes are magnetic. You can put them almost anywhere that you feel you're gonna have any issues and you wanna monitor temperature there. We also have other ways to attach it if your pipe ends up not being magnetic. And then for the low point, now as this one that is, again, you might be familiar with what a low point looks like. And for the majority that we have encountered look like this. So what we end up doing is adding this T and the sensor that's sort of, the brass plug that is horizontal in this picture. That's what measures both temperature of the water and the water presence, right? So if you have water accumulating to the point that it reaches that sensor, that's when it would trigger some type of notification to let you know that you have water in the system and that you also have a temperature that's concerning. Next slide. So with all this stuff, right? I mean, and I know it could be sometimes when we present this could be a little overwhelming, but once we bring it back down to sort of what it is to implement and what it is when we install and what you actually end up having, all the work is sort of done on our side. So all the things that happen to make your all the notifications and all the we made the installation to be retrofittable and very easy. So the anything else that comes to interacting with your data, it becomes sort of standard, we hope. So this provides now a new way to look at your fire sprinkler system. Right now, what you'll have, if you go to one of your risers, you'll have a sticker of the last person did an inspection last quarter that tells you, pressure was, 70 psi when they were there, and then you have that quarterly checkoff by an inspector coming in. What now this provides is a new way to look at your fire sprinkler system, and what we find out when we started doing a lot of this sort of prototyping a few years back, is that the system is a lot more dynamic than we originally expected. So here in the purple line, we have sort of water pressure. You can see it's pretty consistent, doesn't move very much. We have the air temperature, which you'll see fluctuations almost daily, and this is more than likely just due to people being in the building and not being in the building at night. So things just turn the AC on and off. We also have here on the blue line the compressor pressure. So what you'll see here, this is about a month worth of data. As you can see, when this is a pretty tight dry system, right? You can see that the compressor cycled twice over this period. So you can see it by just sort of the system decreasing pressure, and then it sort of has a little bump up, and it just continues to go until it hits that low point again and goes back up. Next slide. I'm not sure what the next slide is. Yes. Okay. So go back one slide, Gaurav. So this slide again. So this is a pretty tight system, pretty closed system. And this is sort of what you want your sprinkler system to look like. All your system pressure, water pressure is pretty consistent. Nothing here out of the ordinary. Now, again, this is 1 month of data. And if you go to the next slide, now you can see in this slide, you have a few things that might be kind of surprising. So we almost see on the water pressure side, and this is about a week of worth of data. On the water pressure side, you'll see this sort of drops in pressure, which could be significant or could be completely meaningless. We don't really know. What we do know here now is that we have something happening almost daily. on the water side that is decreasing the pressure. If something were had to happen and for some reason that was consistent, then we will have an advanced notification that something is going on, and you can see the history of what has been happening. So it wouldn't be a surprise if you see this again. We can expect this drop again likely the next day, and some of the analytics that we're starting to build in. Something else that you'll notice, again, the timeline here is from March 28th of last year to April 4th of last year. So again, just about a week. You have this compressor and air temperature and air pressure, the system air pressure, and the green and red in the bottom. And you can see how often this was cycling compared to the other one, right? I mean, this system is cycling. I mean, I'm not even gonna try to count, but it's multiple days in a day, multiple times in a single day. I mean, you're probably looking at 10 times a day, which means that your compressor is cycling for a reason, and it's because you likely have some leaks in your system. I think Gaurav will get to some examples later on where we can see when a system started leaking, and we're able to detect it and sort of provide notification to fix something before it became a bigger issue. But something like this, right? I mean, if you're an inspector or if you're gonna come in to do an inspection, you have this information before you get there, and you'll be able to at least, either internally, if you're, whether you're not the inspector, you're the end user, you're looking at this, you'll know that your system might have something going on that you want to look at in the next year or so, or maybe more immediately, depending on where this is located. You know that your compressor is cycling more than it should, which could shorten the life of your compressor. And it could in this system, if you're familiar with a fire protection system, an inspector can tell that this is a air-mounted compressor just because there's no tank, because the air system and the compressor are cycling together, right? So I mean, before somebody shows up to your site, they'll know what to expect, and they'll know what they're seeing before they get there. So we'll help them also troubleshoot anything that does happen. Next slide. And then, from the end user perspective, right? So you don't have to dig deep into the data. I mean, I personally enjoy it. I'm an engineer, right? So I like looking at this data, sort of digging into it, see what I can find and all the trends. But at the end of the day, we make this data very useful and make it very easy to understand. So data gathered from the sprinkler system is only as valuable as how you can interpret it and how it can be analyzed. So we have a rules engine that does that, right? So when it comes to have trigger notifications depending on the type of system and how you want to be, what kind of things you want to be notified on, like low air, high water, things like that. So we have. So in the high level overview, right, that we provided before, so on the cloud side, this is what makes that everything possible. So we have a dashboard, a web dashboard that can be accessible anywhere on any computer. We're working on a mobile app at the same time. And you can get your notifications for all your system and see all the graphs and the historical data for all the parts that you have connected on this dashboard, which makes, if you have a very large campus and you have a lot of things connected, from your desk, you can see anything that's abnormal, and you go target that specific thing before just walking around the whole campus trying to find what the issue is. We also provide mobile and email notifications. So but at the same time, you can, if something is a different sort of priority, we have sort of notifications, FYIs, things that are not, maybe something that is not as important, but you should consider looking at. And then we have things that could be a big issue, right? So a low point with water and 20-degree weather, that's going to provide you the highest level of notification because that is going to be an issue, right? You have freezing temperature and you have water present, that's a problem. If you have, like I said, in the middle of the summer, right now you have all your low points are full of water. It's not a big deal because even though they have water, they are not going to freeze, right? Unless you have them somewhere that could be frozen, but you do have that temperature feedback to sort of play with those two things. So you will get a notification, but more of an FYI, right? Like it's not an urgent need. It's something that you have to consider draining in the next few, if you're around the area, if you're sort of doing that activity at that time. Go ahead, Gaurav, next slide. And again, this is what this looks like on the dashboard. I wish we could do a demo sort of live. It doesn't the webinar doesn't work well to do this, so we'll put a screenshot here. But this is what some of your system will look like. right? So you would have, so your different system, for this example, we have a pre-action system with 2 low points on that building and a temperature monitoring device. And it tells you what, if your system is okay, depending on the thresholds that you set for your system. So at a quick glance, before you even do anything, you know that your building in system 1, for example, is good to go, right? So this almost takes care of your inspection. So if for whatever reason you cancel, your inspection was canceled, this will give you the peace of mind that your system is ready to fight a fire if something were to happen. And it gives you there's a drop down menu that you can see the historical data similar to what we're showing in the previous slides, where you have all these graphs. But again, you don't have to dig into those graphs. This gives you the snapshot of what your system looks like at the moment. And this has been very useful, because if we have again, if we have water presence, you'll see that little drop is full of water. So now if you have, let's say, 50 low points throughout your campus, now instead of you going to every single low point and draining all of them, you can see which ones have water and just target those specifically, right? So you don't have to go, unless you want to, right? Take a very long walk to try to drain all of them. You can go to the 2 or 3 that might have water and just drain those specifically, because you know that they do have water. And just open a drain and nothing comes out. Next slide, Gaurav. So over the last couple of years, we've been doing a pilot of this, and the method of validation to understand the potential benefits and use cases of a data-enabled fire sprinkler system involved the controlled deployment of devices to some specific customers. This approach allowed the project team to work closely with the end users and service providers to really transform the assumptions and some of the uncertainties that we had into sort of real knowledge that we can apply to the dashboard and real rules that we can add and try to sort of improve on the offering. Variations of the systems were installed in about 25 sites across the United States, in different buildings, geographical locations, and the customer needs were different at some of the different locations. I think we're mostly focused around the Midwest, and all the way to Colorado. We have some, I'm personally located in Rhode Island. So we have, or pretty cold weather every year, basically. But we try to sort of do our pilots in locations that are sort of in the middle of the country, because might not always be prepared for very, very cold weather. It's sort of this transition that the systems might not always be designed to weather a really big sort of cold front. And we saw, through our internal research that this is some of the locations that suffer the most from some of this freezing issues, because they're not always the systems are not always designed with that in mind. And some of the systems could be really old, and and that seems to even the codes have changed, the systems have been installed and have been sort of grandfathered in. So we have varied devices, but again, we sort of try to focus where this temperature fluctuation, it's not, it seems to be a lot more of an issue. And using this input, sort of this, this data-enabled approach, we can continuously monitor fire sprinkler systems and, be able to do a lot of different things, right? We've been able to reduce service-related downtime, decrease annual repair cost, and Gaurav is going to go through a few examples here of some of the real sort of life examples that we've encountered during our pilots. So I think, Gaurav, the next slide is yours. Okay, there you go.
Oh, thanks, Pepe. That was a really good overview. So I think, so I'll go through a few, case studies, from some of the pilot sites we've done, and you'll see, how the system is being applied in real life situations. I think just, you already know this, but every fire protection system and the way it's used is a little different. Every building and the way it's used is very different, right? And so, providing the option to sort of customize, such a technology to your needs, right, is important, right? So that way it can service you and your need, really. So that's important to know. Now, I have 3 case studies here that I wanted to go through, right? The first one, which, a lot of you identify with, right? This is related to a campus actually. This was a building in the college campus in New England region, and they it had a previous problem with frozen pipes, at a condensate drain of a dry sprinkler system, right? And so this caused significant damage to one of the new buildings at their campus, and what they did, right, really was to hire a service company to come out, on a weekly basis. So that was a lot of cost for them, right? And empty out all the condensate drains, right? So they went around the campus, touched all the condensate drains and checked them out and emptied them out, right? And so this is, of course, not a very efficient way of doing it, but honestly, without really having insight into which one to go empty, that's the only way to do this, right? So this was expensive, of course, right? And it impacted the efficiency of the service provider as well, right? And what we did, right, our solution was to have a condensate, drain monitoring kit, right? We installed a temperature and a water presence sensor at each of these drains, and we applied temperature thresholds such that we knew, which ones were at risk of freezing, and the system allows you, like Pepe pointed out, to provide an early notification of such an event that might happen, right? And so, armed with this data, what they could now do was go to condensate drains which were really at the risk of freezing and not go to the other ones, right? Because not all of the ones, water didn't accumulate at the same rate, and some of them weren't really at the risk of freezing, right? So the service company then used this data, which was real-time data, to target specific condensate drains and increase their efficiency. And when you think of what it helps the end user with, right, is really not having to deal with evacuating buildings or relocation costs for students and expensive repairs and things like that. So I think this one was pretty interesting, and I'm sure some of you might identify with it, right? And now when you look at, this is just an example of that, right? But you see that that's the low point monitor that we had applied over there, and it of course was available real time. Okay, so I have another example, and this one is for a different sort of scenario, right? This is a hospital facility, and this is a situation where they were dealing with unexpected sort of repairs. They really wanted to reduce their maintenance costs and emergency repairs and things like that, and so they wanted a real-time view of their system. And what they really, once we sort of applied the system here, right, we applied valve monitoring kits, and this is in fact one of our biggest pilot sites. So they have all sorts of sensors installed in this building, right? And really the idea was to sort of avoid evacuating patients, right, which is of course a health risk, a lot of liability. They didn't want to have to repair and re-sterilize these rooms because if any damage that happened, in fact, I think one of the, some of these damages that had occurred, they had to pay $30,000 to $50,000 of cost, per scenario, per event that happened. So it was a big pain for them, and of course, the additional costs that come with that, right? And so, once we sort of did that, you were able to see the system in real time, right? And there were some interesting observations we made, right? So you'll see a screenshot of that, one of those sites. You saw, the compressor runtime, was quite, it was around 22 minutes or so, and the system leak time, downtime was 72 minutes, right? Both which, it indicated like a leak in the system, right? And when you consider NFPA 13, right, it states, 1.5 pressure loss per 24 hours is acceptable. And, for this system, the leakage rate was around 13 PSI per hour, right? Which, was around 312 PSI per 24-hour period. So that's a lot of, it's causing the compressor to cycle more frequently, right? And really, this is how we were able to identify, a system leak, right? so what we did as a result of that was, these advanced notifications that we were getting, we were able to get in, identify where these leaks were happening, and preventative maintenance was performed, such that we didn't get to the point where, there was a system failure and, the company, the end user had to deal with all those additional costs that I just talked about. And then the last one, which again, I hope some of you will identify with, right? This is for residential building. But this is where, we had sprinkler pipes freezing a lot, right? It was an exterior wall above an apartment balcony, right? So these pipes kept freezing and bursting. And what they did, right, was they implemented a venting solution to sort of keep it heated, but it was inconsistent results. So it helped, but, they didn't really know what was going on, really. And so, it didn't seem to completely avoid the problem, right? So what we did as a solution was, installed a temperature kit to monitor temperature along that pipe, near the exterior wall. And then we were able to customize the thresholds at which point, notifications would be triggered. And we would really, be able to provide that advanced notification such that, if there was a freezing situation that was going to happen, we were able to sort of predict that, beforehand so we could avoid it. And, you'll see an image of this, but you'll see this air vent over here, to that sprinkler pipe, which is over there. And again, once you have this real-time view that's provided to the end user, you can really take advanced action and be proactive about the situation. So, I have, one last slide, which I want to talk about, but really this is the first time, because this technology, right, when you talk about air sensor, temperature sensors and monitoring pressure, this technology has existed for a while. It's the first time we're really applying it to the fire sprinkler industry, right? And so this is, it's in its very early stages of infancy. What we want to do is continue to sort of advance in this area. We want to be able to predict system failure much before it happens, so we are able to reduce, runtime costs for end users and avoid repairs down the line, expensive repairs down the line. And we want to do that through being proactive and being able to monitor system trends, right? And when you look at really the long term with this technology, right, we want to continue advancing the capabilities we have, right, and also sort of bring in more around connected devices in NFPA 25, right? And we really want data-enabled IoT technology, to propel the fire industry forward and have relevant codes and standards towards, connected, proactive, more safer future, and ultimately, really provide peace of mind to the end users, right? Because most people, when they have a fire protection system, we just expect it to do its job, and I think something like this will really help us get there. So this was my last slide, but before I do close out and we open it up for questions, I do have one polling question, I believe, which, Katie, I hope you can cue this up. Really want to get more interest from you, on this. If you'd like to collaborate with us in piloting this technology, or if not, if you'd just like to be informed about what we're doing in this space.
All right. Just waiting for some votes to come in. I have a couple. Just give it a few more seconds. All right. And I think all that are going to answer are answering, so I'll close it and can share with you.
Okay, it's fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, and I think we have plenty of time for Q&A. So, if you have any questions about this at all, any clarifications, Epi and I are here happy to help you answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Pepe and Guara, for the very informative presentation. Interesting technology. This time we invite the attendees to submit your questions via the your pane. There's a questions pane. Katie, I don't see it coming up on my computer. Is it up?
Yeah, there's no questions yet, so, but there's a question box. Somebody can enter questions.
Okay. So we'll have, we'd love to hear your questions. You can submit them, you know, via just type them into the questions pane. Then as they'll pop up on my computer and I can read them to Pepe and Gaurav. In the meantime, I do have a couple questions to help kick it off. The first one is, you know, how many devices are required to cover a typical, for example, a college dormitory or even a, you know, an entire campus?
Sure.
Pepe, you want to take that one?
Yes, yeah, thanks for the question. So the technology we're using to communicate to the internet is sort of a AT&T SIM card, so basically your cell phone tower. So that could be installed up to a mile from a device, from a physical, one of the edge devices. And the way they communicate from the gateway to the edge device is through this LoRa technology. It's a sort of one of these communication protocols that enables long-range communication between smart devices. So a single gateway can support up to 3,000 devices. And you know what we've tested it line of sight up to 3 miles, but I think 1 mile seems to work well in sort of open areas and depending on what the building situation is. And then we have, depending on if you have building garages full of concrete and full of cars, that can affect the range of some of the system. So while one single gateway can support up to 3,000 devices in a pretty big campus area, you can also add additional gateways to be able to provide more coverage in a bigger campus, or if there's enough interruptions or just a lot of things that are not good for communication. So yeah, so we can cover. We're looking for large campuses to be able to test. We haven't had that opportunity at this point, so we've been able to do sort of our own testing, but not anything to the extent that there's some very large campuses to see how much we can do with a single gateway. But again, more than one gateway is a possibility if the campus is big enough.
Excellent, thank you. Also, when will this technology be commercially available? And if one of our members, any of our members wants to pilot this technology, who should they contact?
So I can take that one. So, like Pepe mentioned, we've been sort of working, to pilot this technology over the last 2 years, and we've really refined it at this point. And we have this installed in around 26 pilot sites or so. And, we are at the moment still, supporting pilot sites. So if you're interested in doing a pilot install, please get in touch with either myself or Pepe, and I know, our contact information on the screen, or you can even get in touch with our business development manager, Dennis Phillips. I think our contact information will be provided after the webinar as well. And in terms of, timing of commercial availability, we are going to be bringing this to market towards the end of the calendar year. So it's going to be more broadly available at that time.
Excellent, thank you. I do see we have a couple of questions submitted, so I will read the first one. Does this technology require approval by UL or FM? And secondly, are there any applicable code requirements that would apply to this technology?
Excellent question. So to the first question, the UL approvals, the answer is no, right? So we sort of fall into this sort of gray area for in the UL spectrum because we're not. So this at this point is an auxiliary part of the fire protection system. So whether so what I mean by that is that all the things that are connected to the fire protection system, the way that we're connecting them, are not going to affect the fire protection system in any way, shape, or form. So the products do not have to have UL approval, and it's something we've looked at in the last couple of years. Confirmed with them. We do work with UL very closely on all of our other products. So that's one thing that we found to be lucky, and working in this space, that UL approval is not required, which allows us to sort of be able to prototype and bring things to market a lot faster. Well, with that said, we do a lot of the UL requirement test anyways that would be required for similar components when it comes to the electrical components. It's all low voltage. We're talking about 2 AA batteries for edge devices. But we do a lot of the same internal testing that UL would do on parts that would go on a sprinkler system when it comes to pressure rating and it comes to some of the interaction between other parts of the system. When it comes to standards, so the new standards, so all the water-based standards, the 13s, 25, 20, 24, are now, the newer latest versions are starting to allow for this type of technology to sort of take over from standard inspections, right? So if you look at the language and some of the new standards, the 2020 version, you'll see that you'll see the wording remote inspections and distance inspection or distance testing. I can't remember what the exact wording is. We're part of some of the committees for some of these NFPA standards. So we've worked to make sure that this technology would also be within what they're specifying when it comes to this remote testing and inspection. So hopefully that answers your question. And feel free to reach out if you need more details.
Great, thank you. I'll remind the attendees, if you still have a question or follow-up question, go ahead and submit it, type it into the questions pane. I do have one more question. What would be a rough estimate on the programs to monitor sprinklers on a college campus? I assume they're talking a cost estimate.
Yeah, I can try and address it, and Pepe, feel free to jump in, of course. So I would say the answer is it really depends, right? So I can give you a sense of how this is being structured, right? So there's of course the hardware, which Pepe sort of went through. There's a gateway, that talks to the cloud, and there's a connectivity cost, of course, with the SIM card, and then there's different devices, right, depending on what you're trying to measure. And so there's a hardware cost, and that would really depend on the number of sensors and the type of sensors that you install. Typically, all of our pilot sites have one gateway, and so that should cover most people's needs. The second gateway isn't really required. And then we're also going to be charging an annual fee to give you access to the dashboard, right, which is really the brains of this system. So that's how it's sort of broken out. And in terms of typical cost, right, that's something we're still working out right now in terms of what the how that pricing is gonna be. But I think again, it's the important thing to understand is when you think of the cost of an event for an end user, right? Sometimes it's to the tune of $30,000 to $50,000. So our cost structure is going to be a lot less in terms of trying to give you the ability to avoid such incidents. Pepe, I don't know if you want to add something to that.
Yeah, so I think I've had this question before, and I know usually a follow-up question that looking for even a ballpark. So just based on some of the pilots that we've done, I mean, I can't speak for the recurring part of the equation, but just the hardware that you need to get going, which is a one-time cost. I mean, it really ranges between $5,000 to $10,000 just for getting the things inside the campus. Like Gaurav said, now the price, depending on how many devices you need, and so that's where the variation really is. But the one-time cost to get the components, get them installed, at least for pilot size, where we originally started sort of running those, somewhere in that ballpark, right? So that's just sort of your initiation sort of cost to get in. And then, like Gaurav said, the only thing after that is that there is a recurring fee, and that's something that we're still sort of working out now on what the cost structure is. So we don't really have a number to provide related to that. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a ballpark on, you know, sort of what it would cost to set up a campus with, let's say, a couple of different risers, you know, a few low point devices, you know, up to 5 or so, and some temperature sensors here and there. You're probably looking at, you know, depending on the complexity of the system, 5 to 10,000 sort of to just, you know, get in, I suppose.
All right, great, thank you. I don't see any other questions at this time, so I think we shall wrap up.
All right.
Fantastic.
So again, I think you guys will have the presentation, and our contact information is at the end of them. Well, here it is. So email, LinkedIn, phone number, any of those things will work fine for me. If you have any other questions, like, you know, when we did ask if you're interested in continuing to do a pilot, you know, we're still running pilots for the next few months. So we, you know, we'd love to sort of be in contact and continue to develop this technology. One last thing I'd like to mention is that, you know, we're continuing to develop new things to monitor. So this is just sort of the beginning, and we're continuing to see what else in the fire protection system can we remotely test and inspect. And we know, you know, working with people that sort of do maintenance all the time and sort of that this is their core responsibility, always have really good ideas and always have things that we might not experience, right? I mean, I'm sitting in an R&D environment for most of my time. So it really helps when we have, you know, some of this beta and some of the pilots to sort of learn what else is a pain for our customers. So please feel free to reach out with any questions or any comments. And if you're interested, again, on continue to do a pilot with us. So thanks again.
Yeah, no, definitely echo that, and thank you, you know, from my side as well to everyone who took the time to attend. Hopefully this information was helpful, and you know, you learned a little bit from us.
Okay, well, thank you all for attending. We appreciate your attendance. I want to thank Gaurav and Pepe from Johnson Controls for putting on this session. Just as a reminder, we will have our next Master Property Program workshop in St. Louis, March 4th and 5th of next year. And again, that at the bottom is our webpage where you can go and look. We're getting ready in August to have our meeting, probably virtual, to start planning the workshop, but we hope to have you all attend again this year. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you.